About a year ago, I was browsing an Ask Reddit thread about who knows what when I came across a discussion on the state of modern cartoons. It was mostly pessimistic, with people discussing how companies only put out the cheapest pandering shows on these networks nowadays. But in the thread, somebody mentioned a show called Steven Universe. I'd heard about it before a few times, even catching a glimpse of it while skipping through channels, but I'd never really felt any motivation to go and check it out. The biggest reason for this is because I'm not really that big on cartoons. I'm not completely against them though, since I've enjoyed the more mature and complex ones such as Rick and Morty with its dark humor and nihilistic views on existence, and Adventure Time with deep and relatable characters, plus a constantly expanding world that kept me watching. Now, could you believe my surprise when the person in that thread mentioned that Rebecca Sugar, the storyboarder of some of my favorite Adventure Time episodes, was the creator of Steven Universe? I was now a bit more interested, but I put it away in the back of my mind for a while, considering giving it a try later, and that's what I did. About a month or two later, I decided to watch some of the first episodes, a little side distraction while I worked on some other mindless tasks. You know, painting, writing poetry, sampling wine, that kind of stuff. Now I'm actually kind of glad that's what I did, seeing as how I probably would have quit watching if I'd been focusing too much on these earlier episodes. But I kept watching, and eventually, I got to the one that finally caught my eye enough to make me actually start to pay attention. Giant Woman was my 12th episode I watched, and it absolutely blew me away. It starts off normal enough, with Amethyst, Pearl, and Steven joking around, playing checkers and whatever. During this part we learn through exposition that gems can perform fusion, a process through which two gems combine their attributes to become one. You know, like Dragon Ball Z.
Other two! The Saiyans? They're here. I am they. We are one. Unfortunately for you, Omega.
After, Steven, Amethyst, and Pearl then are all sent off on a mission by Garnet to retrieve the Heaven Beetle from the Sky Spire, an ancient gem structure floating above the clouds. This episode starts to get interesting when the gems become trapped inside the temple by a giant bird and have no choice but to resort to fusion. Unfortunately, before they can finish, Steven is eaten by the giant bird, which is then just the motivation they needed for successfully fusing. You can actually spot the exact moment in this episode where the show actually becomes good. What directly follows is one of the most incredible action sequences I have ever seen in a cartoon, backed by some kick-ass music, but more on that later. From this point on, the show had my full attention, and boy was I in for a ride. The series from this point on begins to develop an identity of its own, and begins to put character development and exploration of its themes in higher priority than wacky humor.
Whoa! Alright! That's about time. Good job, buddy!
We learn more about the characters, which is definitely the strongest aspect of this show. I swear to God, there is not a single unlikable character in this show. Even the less important characters all have their motivations, values, and charm. Ronaldo, for example, is an insane conspiracy theorist that runs an actual Tumblr blog tied into the show.
Already be in the know if you followed my blog, Keep Beach City Weird! I document all the weird things that happen in Beach City!
Lars and Sadie are in the donut store in Beach City and have a very complicated relationship with each other. Lars is selfish and mean at times, but Sadie is able to see the soft and affectionate side of him, despite being an often victim of his selfishness and apathetic attitude towards work and his own relationship with Sadie. Mayor of Beach City, Bill Dewey, is probably my favorite of the minor characters. He's all around a fun and entertaining character while also making some pretty ballsy commentary on politics for a children's show.
It's not lying when you're the mayor. It's politics.
I think that just the idea of a mayor in charge of a place as chaotic and prone to disaster is endlessly entertaining, and I enjoy every one of his appearances.
Hello there, young universe. Any of your sisters home?
My sisters?
Your caretakers, you know? The tall one, the purple one, the hot one.
Now back to that music I mentioned earlier. Steven Universe's original soundtrack is composed by Ivy and Sarasu, and by God is it awesome. The show owes a lot of its emotional impact and charm to the soundtrack, which is, needless to say, absolutely brilliant. The variation and quality of what we hear in the background of each scene is nothing short of perfect. Every one of the main characters has their own instrument tied to their personality. Garnet's is a synth bass, Amethyst is an electric drum kit, Stevens is a triangle wave. Some of Pearl's scenes feature a very Final Fantasy-esque jazzy piano accompaniment. Peridot's ominous, mysterious introduction is complemented by a very alien-sounding, ominous track, but after she's captured and loses her limb enhancements, becoming a whole lot less threatening. In turn, her music accompaniment also becomes much less threatening. Lapis' haunting piano motif helps portray just how dangerous and threatening she is to the gems. And it's not just the instrumental tracks that are great, but the songs are amazing. Seriously, this show has come out with some fantastic musical numbers, some of my favorites being Do It For Her and Peace and Love on the Planet Earth. All the major characters here can sing, and when they do, it is nothing short of beautiful. I, for one, cannot wait to hear the singing voices of Jennifer Paz and Broadway star Patti LuPone, who appears as the voice of the current main antagonist.
You are out of line.
Getting away from that, I'd like to mention the story. About halfway through Season 1, around the time Lapis is introduced, the overall tone of the show completely shifts. With every episode, it gets farther and farther away from the cheap laughs and goofy humor of the early episodes.
Anyone want a wet bagel?
And it becomes more human and... I know this sounds weird, but Steven Universe is actually very grounded in reality compared to the other cartoons I know of. Well, not really reality, but the show rarely, if ever, breaks the fourth wall or the rules of the canon. It takes both itself and the viewer very seriously. It is the perfect, colorful mix of reality and fiction that keeps me coming back for more. The people on Earth know the gems exist. They've been here for as long as history can remember.
Why is everyone dressed like old-timey people?
They are old-timey people.
Wait, but that would mean... How old are you guys?
Much older than any human.
The thing is, they just sort of prefer to disregard their existence. The characters here very clearly change and develop through the series. Each character has their own problems, whether it be the loss of the most important person in their life, guilt over their very existence, or difficulty expressing their feelings. Steven is probably the one that develops the most through the series, and as he matures, so does the show. It begins to deal with some heavy themes such as depression, guilt, betrayal, and loss. It can even be argued that the show deals with even heavier subjects, like necromancy, rape, genocide, and so on, but some of those are a bit of a stretch. So, are there any parts I didn't like about this show? Well, of course there were. Like everything, Steven Universe has its flaws. Sometimes the messages can be heavy-handed, but that's to be expected from a show for children. Also, I find the most interesting episodes to be ones that are just the gems interacting with each other. The personalities are just so entertaining, and seeing them talk and work through situations is very enjoyable. However, it feels like the writers didn't really start to realize this until very recent episodes. Other than that, I can't really come up with very many valid criticisms of this show that couldn't just be dismissed with, that wouldn't sit well with a target audience, or that will be explained in a later episode. Hold on, can I take a minute to discuss the continuity in this show? It exists. Seemingly insignificant moments, locations, items, and events return much later in the show, revealed to be important to the plot and lore. For example, in the 46th episode of the first season, Rose's Scabbard, there was a part where Steven makes a jump between two floating bits of land. Halfway through the jump, Pearl looks back at him, which causes Steven to suddenly fall, once again breaking the laws of physics. Much later, in the 6th episode of the third season, Steven Floats, it is revealed that Steven can control the velocity and descent of his jumps, depending on his emotional state.
It's great to be back!
From this, it becomes very obvious that Steven's fall on Rose's Scabbard was due to the sudden change in his emotional state from seeing Pearl's expression. So, what is my final verdict? Well, if I were to give Steven Universe an arbitrary number score, it would be a 10 out of 10. why? This is officially my favorite TV show ever. I've watched through the entire series at least 3 times. This show is an amazing blend of everything a series like this should have. The magic, the lovable, relatable characters, the incredible lore that we gain deeper insight to with each new episode. This would be my example of a perfect show. It's not limited by its TV PG rating like I thought it would be at first, but rather uses it to express heavy, mature subject matter in a completely different way. The joy Steven Universe has brought me outmatches every other show that I've ever seen, ever. And it makes you actually care about the lore, characters, and story events. It has emotion and drama, but balances it with lighthearted humor and magical adventure. This show is simply great, and I'd recommend it to just about everyone. Even if you're not into cartoons like me, you'll enjoy the surprising depth and maturity. If you've ever dealt with the same problems as the characters here, you'll relate and connect with them. If you want it, this show has it. Ladies and gentlemen, Steven Universe.